Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Magic Mushrooms event, in which the Fung Dingus is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as the troop, it does come in with a bunch of green red. It is an epic, so you can get them for super cheap, only 200 glory each, so definitely worth stocking up on them. As far as the troop itself, it's kind of average. It gets to explode a bunch of purple gems, and summons either a giant toadstool and or a giant explode stool, neither of which are particularly too good. And then, of course, like in normal Goblin style, it gains a extra turn. Has potential for a lot of mana accumulation. Doesn't have like an Empower or anything like that, so it's going to be a little bit slower than Leprechaun and several other options out there. Harpy Mage, stuff like that. However, the automatic extra turn can be pretty useful, since you don't need to worry about it actually landing the extra turn, since of course it will get it automatically. Traits are pretty underwhelming though, so overall probably not going to be used too much, but it's mostly just going to be used as an extra turn exploder, which could find its way into some teams occasionally, but more often than not probably won't be used too often compared to quicker options, as he does have a bit of startup before he gets rolling, and there's better loop capabilities for various teams that are likely better to use than him. It is February 1st, so we actually do have a different imp in the drop table. They run 2 months seasonally, so the Winter Imp, which is the best of the imps, is now out, and the Imp of Love is now in the drop table. I would personally wait until this Friday, because we got a new mythic coming this Friday, of course, because it's the first Friday of the month, as we do every single month. Get the new mythic coming in, so if you want to go get the Imp of Love, you probably want to wait until then. Though no worries if you didn't end up picking up the Winter Imp, because oddly enough, it's actually in Soulforge this week, so you'll be able to get it there if you didn't already pick it up. Very rare that that would actually happen coincidentally perfectly like that, but it did end up doing so this time around. As far as the event key drop table, they are probably worth going for this week, at least for one specific thing, and that is of course for Iron Gut. If you haven't already been picking it up, don't forget in the resources section of the shop for 100 or 1,800 glory, 180 each, you can pick up some event keys. So if you've been lacking some, you can do that every single week, and it is insanely good value. I even still do it, even though our event key stack is very, very large. But anyways, as far as the event key drop table, it's everything underneath Zaejin, with the 4 exceptions being the Amethyrax troops. Do keep in mind, one of those Amethyrax troops, really good, King Gobtruffle, but he is not in the event key drop table. You specifically have to use Chaos Shards in the Amethyrax faction in the Underworld. So any of them that are marked with Amethyrax are not in the event key drop table. However, everything else that you see here is. The most noteworthy thing, or probably overall, is Iron Gut, of course. Iron Gut is arguably one of the best mythics in the entire game. Definitely the best delve mythic, especially for how accessible it is compared to something like a Zugoth. He ends up having a really high Devour chance. If he has over 100 attack, he has literally 100% Devour chance, assuming they don't have immune, and he has an automatic extra turn on that. Insanely good for doing delves, and is generally the main reason why you pick up a High King Iron Gut, is to go do delves. Everywhere else he's kind of average, but in delves he's essentially the best troop in the entire game. Aside from that, there's a bunch of goblins that have various extra turns. Almost none of them are particularly bad. They are very degrees of good, but pretty much anything that has an automatic extra turn is obviously usable to at least some capacity, due to the fact that it has an automatic extra turn. So pretty much everything that you're getting from the event key drop table, even if you don't end up getting the mythic, is at least usable to some capacity. So definitely a good idea to open some event keys and maybe try for High King Iron Gut, though do keep in mind it is a very slim chance, only a 0.1% chance, so even if you open like 1,000 keys, there's still a chance you do not get it. So do be mindful of that. But yeah, if you've been wanting to get that Iron Gut and you don't have the diamonds for it, it's another opportunity to potentially try and getting him, which would be pretty useful. As far as the event this week, it is so ridiculously confusing. So we do have spell increase. So generally you want to use spell related abilities. However, you do have access to Mang. So even though the bonus is only for spells, you can actually solo the entire thing by using a skull spam team or skull oriented team by utilizing Mang or Earth's Fury, most likely Mang. So do keep that in mind if you're going to be going through the event, as it's not necessarily 100% required to go down the spell route if you're missing some of these spell options. So as far as the rooms here, it is probably one of the most confusing weeks we've ever had. So the easiest way to explain this is to explain what the good rooms are and what the bad room is. So the 2 best rooms are the legendary room of King Gobtruffle and the Fung Dingus, the new troop that ended up coming out. So basically these two that have like these little skull thing. So basically if they have a little skull thing, go for them. They are the 2 that end up upscaling based on if you do them more, and whenever you see the skull, you should always do them, regardless of their rarity. They are both extremely worth it, the higher rarity one obviously being the slightly better one. However, the lower end is extremely confusing, because the epic room of Sir Snothelm is actually worth less than the Fungomancer. So basically one way to think about it is basically if they're related to like a mushroom, they're worth more points, is basically how it comes down to. So Stir Snothelm, oddly enough, even though it's epic, is worth the least amount of points. And then Fogomancer is worth a little bit more. And then the Explode Stool is worth a little bit more than that. So basically it goes in order of King Gobtruffle being the best room and upscales, Fundingus being the next best room and the upscale, both of which having a skull, so they're easy to identify, the two best rooms. Then it goes Explode Stool, which is the epic room. We don't currently have it on screen, but that would be the mid-range one. Then, oddly enough, the ultra rare is the next one, the Fungomancer. And then the absolute worst is Sir Snothelm. So basically, focus on the skulls, ignore Sir Snothelm, and that's pretty much what we have to do for this event. A little bit weird, but that's basically how the point breakdown ends up coming out for this week. Probably one of the more confusing weeks, but that's basically all you'd have to end up doing for it. Anyways, aside from that, as far as teams, well, we'll go over to teams in a little bit. But do keep in mind, it is spell-oriented. It is an elemental red restriction. So you do have a couple options here that are going to be decent. If you have Amarok, it could be okay to end up running here. If you have Infernus, it could be good. If you want to kind of run a Yarrow loop, you can go around that kind of strategy. Obsidius wouldn't be horrible. Obviously, Phoenicia being one of the better options. If you need something a little bit lower rarity, you have option to like Frostfire. If you need super low rarity, you might be able to get away with Sunbird. I don't feel like it's going to upscale too well, though, since you can't really feed it HP in a proper way. But not too many good options, and most of the options that are good are like all mythics and legendaries, which is a little bit unfortunate for this event. So it might be clunky at times, though do keep in mind you do have access to the Mang weapon, as I mentioned earlier, which worst comes to worst, you could probably solo this entire event with Mang, even though you don't have you don't utilize magic upscaling as well. But Mang should pretty much be able to go all the way. Just use a tanky hero class, use Mang, and it'd be a lot slower than using cast-oriented stuff, but if you really had to cheese it, it would be doable with it, like set Sentinel Mang and just like never die. Anyways, as far as other stuff that we got going on this week, Tuesday we got the Deep Hive, which is where Beatrix is from, one of the best troops in the game. Wednesday we're getting a new pet. It's going to be a Goblin bonus pet, unlike all the cosmetic pets that we're going to be getting over the next month or so. We're going to be getting a lot of pets every single Wednesday going forward. We're just getting pet after pet after pet after pet. But we got a Goblin bonus one. This obviously synergizes pretty well with the fact that, well, pretty much all of Zaejin is Goblins, like 80-90% of them or so. So you'll be able to get Goblin bonus this Wednesday, completely brand new pet. Thursday's Thief hero class. It's arguably the best stealthy hero class in the game. Situationally, there are a few others that you use, but overall, it's probably the best. Scouting Key did get nerfed. Do be mindful, though. The weapon that you get from this hero class. Of course, the best way to get it is just 250 wins. You don't have to buy for gems. Just get 250 wins and you get it automatically. But the weapon, yeah, kind of fell off quite a bit ever since they nerfed in the last balance patch back in December. And this Friday, we're getting two things. One is a really good mech mythic that synergizes really well with the weapon that we got last Friday, or last weekend. And we're also going to be getting a brand new faction associated to Karakoth that's going to be bringing in some new mechanics related to those blocks in the underworld. They're called stone blocks, but you know, those little blocks that kind of like block your path, those little gray things on the board. They're currently only in underworld. However, the mechanic will actually exist outside of underworld. None of them are substantially good for doing it outside of the underworld, but over time, we might be getting more of them that have this block mechanic that could potentially make loop teams a little bit better, oddly enough. With a small amount on the board, it actually makes them worse, but with a high amount, it can actually concentrate and make the gems spawn in a more specific area so that they have a better chance of actually aligning next to each other. And there's also a decent legend that's going to be coming out that has a stun whenever the enemy casts, which is going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I'm curious to see if they're going to do it for things like freeze into the future, because that'd be a really nice hard counter for various things. But a stun could still be good. Like, it could stun a Beatrix when it's trying to spam you. Of course, that doesn't do as much, but at least it would get rid of the cleanse. Anyways, as far as Soulforge, one pretty noteworthy thing to kind of mention is if you want to collect the imps, and you didn't end up getting Winter Imp is actually the best of the 6 imps, and while they're generally not used too often, it is available in Soulforge. So if you didn't end up picking it up in the last 2 months, this is probably your last chance to get it, probably until next year's December. Realistically, there might be one other chance, but if it rotates back around in Soulforge, but most likely you'll have to wait all the way till December if you do want to get that. So this is pretty much your last chance if you want to go pick that up. As far as mythics are concerned, oh, also there's actually another legends that might be worth it. Generally, you don't want to craft legends. However, another pretty good one is Queen Titania. Queen Titania has pretty much the best fairy fire in the game still, to this current state of the game, where it fairy fires a random enemy on 4x 5x matches. That likely won't stay the case. However, her full AoE damage is just absurdly good. Works really good with the Algoi Queen Titania teams, normally with Summer and a Flamefer. Still has some really good synergy. It's one of the best, like, the teams that she gets used for make some of the best no mythic teams in the game as far as damage output. So definitely worth considering if you're looking for something early game, mid game as a damage source, as she's pretty cheap at only 800 diamonds and will be very effective relative to the cost of actually obtaining her Doppelganger. Aside from that, I believe this is the first time Pan has been in Soulforge. I'm not actually 100% certain on that, but he's around, so if you want to get him, there's that. However, as far as good mythics, there is basically none. I checked earlier. Is it really none? Yeah, it is pretty much none. Pretty much all 4 mythics are worth skipping. Pan is just noteworthy because he hasn't been around as much, so there hasn't been as many opportunities to get him. But yeah, pretty much all 4 are worth skipping. Pan's okay. It's very situational when you would use it. Biggest issue with it is no board control, no extra turn, nothing like that. And for such a big mana cost, it's kind of clunky to use more often than not. However, it's a pretty good disorienting option. Generally, you would only use it twice. Once initially to disorient the enemy team, and then again as a finisher if you're even going to bother casting it again. Generally, you don't want to cast it a second time if it's not going to be the final blow. Overall, it's kind of average, but it's a utility troop that's used ever so occasionally, but definitely not worth going out of your way for compared to other mythic options that exist within the game, so probably just worth skipping as far as mythics are concerned. Aside from that, of course, we have the standard all Zaejin weapons, since it is a Zaejin event. The most noteworthy one to get here is Norbert's Turnip, if you haven't already picked it up. There's some infinite loop Goblin teams that end up forming off of this. There's quite a few different ways that you can end up forming them, depending on how you want to go about it. You could even incorporate the new Exploder that ended up coming out today. Yeah, it creates a bunch of green and red, boosted based on Goblin, so if you use Thief Hero class with 3 other Goblins, obviously it's going to create a bunch of gems. Pretty good value. Definitely advise getting this for its looping capability. Obviously, it's hard countered by freeze, but aside from that, can make for some pretty decent teams. Generally, Double Truffle can end up working out a little bit better, but if nothing else, it actually works better under AI control. So if you're looking for like a good defend team, you can actually use a Norbert's Turnip Goblin team as one of your 6 defend teams for Guild Wars, and Guild Wars is next week, so prepping for that with a Norbert's Turnip could be potentially useful, but it can still be used offensively. Also, it's pretty good for this current week's event, so if you're looking for something like that, you can end up incorporating it into like something like the Thursday class event and stuff like that. So yeah, I would advise getting. As far as weapons, it's definitely highest priority as far as the ones exclusively only available this week. Anyways, as far as a bunch of teams for stuff this week, we have several, I believe 7 total here. So let's start from the top. The first one you've kind of already seen. This is likely what I'm going to be using for most of the World Lore event. It's a double foil E because obviously we have extra spell damage, so doing that really big Phoenicia poke and then just having a follow-up should be perfectly fine. Dawnbringer will apply some barrier to help us not die with Phoenicia. Obviously Phoenicia not really meant to be a first slot troop, but if you end up burying it some off of Dawnbringer, it'll kind of make up for the fact that it's not really that tanky, and the Firebomb's kind of just there to get mana flowing a little bit. You could obviously just go with a different option that kind of uses a little bit more mana, like purple or something, but just kind of doing that for a nice big burst just for the quick kill. And it'll definitely, if you're only doing like something like tier 3, tier 4, it'll definitely get through the earlier battles super quick. The next one I made super cheap. I tried using no mythic, so we did use Mirage Queen. It's a faction mythic, so technically it's a lower rarity than a standard mythic. Main reason for this is it is elemental restriction, so being able to half mana start all elementals is insanely good. So if you haven't already picked up Mirage Queen, I do advise doing so for this event week, as it will, regardless of what team you're using, will substantially increase the impact it has. To get the Mirage Queen, you would have to open Chaos Shards at the portal in the Sunken Fleet faction in the Underworld. I highly advise getting this if you don't already have it, as it is super useful for this event week, and it's not necessarily required, but if there was any week to finally go and get it, it is this week due to how ridiculously useful it'll be. And there's just so many good elementals out there that it's a great thing just to have. It's used for Rowan, it's used for Phoenicia, it's used for a lot of really strong elementals. I feel like almost half the mythics that have been coming into the game lately have been strong elementals, but yes, it's currently the strongest typing in the game. Be interesting to see what happens when a hero class comes in. But anyways, the main premise of this team obviously is all in on Mang. You could do a Titan, you could do a Sentinel, pretty much any tanky hero class that gains barrier on Brown. You can end up doing it with, just throw down Mang. It gains attack based on how much armor it ends up tearing. You then go and pretty much one-shot, two-shot everything. Do that a couple times, you're pretty much good to go. Everything else is just basically for backup, whatever you want to use, either to feed it more mana or to keep it safer, or however you want to end up running it. But basically the whole premise is you win the entire battle with Mang. This will be a lot slower than using a cast-oriented team. However, it'll be very cheap because literally you could just have Mang and the other 3 troops almost don't even matter that you have behind it, since as long as you play out Mang correctly, you should be able to pretty much just solo the entire event, either with Sentinel or Titan hero class. Sentinel would be safer, but Titan would be ever so slightly quicker. As far as the faction, we do have the Deep Hive. As far as Deep Hive, it is a brown-green restriction, though you are allowed to use any color hero weapon. This just happens to be a brown one. But obviously, you could end up doing a Rowan quick kill, you could do Truffle, you could do Beatrix. There's quite a few interesting loop teams, like Forest Troll into Truffle and stuff like that. But this is the cheaper one, so I figured I'd just show this one. It's you don't have access to Mirage Queen, but you can still go double Leprechaun and go Urskia Shield, Rowan, double Leprechaun. Just runs all the way from 20 to 500, so it'd pretty much be good to go the entire time. So there you go. As far as Peer Faction, you can pretty much just spam Beatrix. You do want one Scarab Knight for 2 reasons. One is that it gains barrier on cast, but the other reason is it uses brown, and of course Beatrix creates brown, green and brown. The green you'd obviously want feeding back into herself, and the brown feeding into that. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole premise, is you just keep spamming Beatrix, and Scarab Knight tanks for you the entire time. It does use only one tank, because generally this thing should be able to survive the entire time, and then ideally you go into the final battle with Scarab Knight into triple Queen Beatrix, and then at that point you don't even need to worry about this thing surviving, and you basically just focus entirely on spamming Queen Beatrix. As far as Queen Titania, I figured we show a team for it. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Flamefer will be available next week, by the way, so if you don't own Flamefer, next Monday, 1 week from today, you will be able to go get it in Soulforge. So if you want to maybe save, if you're a little bit low on brown-yellow, you might need to make the determination on if you want a Flamer for next week or if you want a Turnip this week. Between the two, I'm not sure which one would actually be better. I feel like I use Flamer for more, but I also feel like Turnip overall is actually stronger. So it's a weird dilemma. Flamer for, oddly enough, is used for a lot more teams, I do feel. This one, it's used for the Zugoth team because of the burning aspect and the red feeding into it. But yeah, Flamer for same color as Turnip, and it will be available next Monday for the entire week in Soulforge. So do be mindful of that as far as which one you choose. But if you have enough resources, you can just obviously just go for both. But anyways, Flamer for Yagway, Child of Summer, Queen Titania, insanely good team. Yagway has that purple to red convert. You get even more brown to red convert, and then Red Storm. And then Queen Titania, if there's 13 plus red, gets auto extra turn, as well as a super high amount of damage, and the Fairy Fire to make it so they just die quicker. Ends up working out pretty well. Hero class is pretty flexible as far as what you could use. I'm just using Dragon Guard here because it's triple damage to burning, and it's a little bit tanky, so you can end up doing a little bit of tankiness with it. Aside from that, Norbert's Turnip. As far as the Norbert's Turnip team, I was mentioning this earlier. There's a couple different ways you could do this. It's really pretty flexible as far as what teams you can actually build with this. This one ends up utilizing Toad Squeezer because of its impervious, as well as it's actually one of those Slayer kind of troops. But the reason why it's actually good is because it has either or between exploding or enchanting all other allies, so it can still get quite a bit of value off of that. And if I'm not mistaken, it is the only goblin that actually has impervious. There's one or two. I think it might be the only one, which is obviously pretty beneficial for countering freeze and tangle, silence, other similar things like that. Norbert's Turnip obviously does this normal green-red thing, and obviously is fully boost ratioed, given that this is a pure goblin team. You are allowed to repeat goblins too, so if you want to go like double truffle or something like that. Strength Filler is mostly for the disable and a little bit of mana accumulation, while also having the little bit of green. It's generally the better mana accumulator. Like compared to the troop that just came out today, this thing is going to be better almost every single time. While its explosion amount is quite a bit substantially lower, as long as you have a decent amount of magic, it's still going to pretty much explode every single one of the typing. So as far as overall mana accumulation, this basically does the same thing, but with a free silence on top of it, while also having a link that's pretty useful, and is just overall generally better than the troop that just came out today. And King Gob Truffle obviously just is a standard full AoE, and creates a bunch of brown and green similar to that of Beatrix, except more of a loopier kind of troop, but it does physical damage instead of true damage. And aside from that, a somewhat similar team, but you can incorporate this, of course, for a Thief Hero class. That is a restriction of Goblin from Zaejin. So all you really have to do from that is just kind of build up a Goblin team. And Truffle does count under that category because it is both from Zaejin and Amerthrax, so it still counts as a Zaejin troop, even though it resides from Amerthrax and you'd have to go and get it from Amerthrax. It still technically counts under the restriction of Zaejin for the class event. But anyways, that's pretty much everything. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Tonight, of course, we'll be going over all of the chapter tasks for Chapter 7. We'll be doing that at the same time as we always do, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, as we do every single night for Gems of War. Anyways, guys, I'll catch you guys later. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone.